Welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. Coming up today on our final live show of the week, there's news now that the issue of Dreamers, DACA recipients, those are young people who came to the U.S. through no fault of their own, parents brought them here, that it could end up back in the U.S. Supreme Court. But to me, the failure of Congress to secure protections for these so-called Dreamers illustrates the true failure of the two-party system. We'll discuss that. Also, Billboard Chris, have you heard of him? He's a Canadian man who decided that he was so against hormone blockers for kids that he started wearing a human billboard around himself and going to all these liberal places across not only the U.S. and Canada, but the world to spread his message. Well, he was in Seattle, so we're going to preview a conversation I had with Billboard Chris that's going to be played for subscribers coming up this week on Sundays with subscribers. Also, Dueling neo-Nazi stories out of Florida. We'll discuss it on Florida Report. And Oliver Anthony's lesson on what it means to have moral consistency. We're going to close the show with that today in Sanity Check. If you have not become an Undivided subscriber already, please do so. Help support our mission and our movement to give common sense a comeback. undividedpod.com. undividedpod.com. Just $5 a month. What a screaming deal to save our state and maybe one day even save America too. All right, a story out of Western Washington that has to do with an issue that I think became a true problem during 2020. And we've seen the results of this particular initiative. Have you guys heard of the Northwest Bail Fund? There are funds like this that also crept up across the country and really gained steam after George Floyd in Minneapolis and some of the riots and protests that sparked from that. But Northwest Bail Fund is essentially this woke organization that collects money from people who want to give their money to them to bail criminals out of jail. Okay? And it went on hiatus for a while, and I thought, okay, good. Maybe it'll never come back. Well, it's coming back, and it's more woke than ever. I'm going to get into some of the issues that I have, because bail is a constitutional right. I have no issue with people posting bail, but there are some fundamental issues that these funds create in the criminal justice system, in accountability, in public safety that I'll dive into. But just to kind of revisit, so the Northwest Bail Fund was getting a lot of attention, again, a couple years ago. They were bailing out some people who turned out to be really, really bad individuals. And again, I'll get to that in a moment. But just to kind of remind you, they're going to start taking requests again. I believe tomorrow, Nicole, they're going to start taking requests again. But on their website, it had said, we're unable to accept new bail assistance requests at this time. We will resume accepting new requests on September 15th, tomorrow. We are still going to post bail for requests we received before July 1st, 2023. We will not respond to inquiries regarding new requests at this time, blah, 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 blah. So they had basically put the whole thing on pause. And then Jonathan Cho tweeted out today that he got an email, kind of a community alert, talking about this program is going to be coming back. It said, Northwest Community Bail Fund will begin once again to accept requests for bail assistance on September 15th, 2023. We appreciate your patience as we concentrated on the internal work necessary to lay the groundwork for our restructure. Over the summer, we put a lot of thought and effort into assessing who we serve and are responsible to. Come September 15th, we will be focusing on standing between those most vulnerable to abuse by the systems of policing and court-imposed cash bail and those impressive systems. Therefore, we will be prioritizing bail assistance for self-identified non-white and non-cisgender people. So if you're white or you happen to be to identify as the gender you were born into, then you need not ask the Northwest Bail Fund for any help. They went on to say that they will also include factors for who they decide to bail out. Factors are included but are not limited to health factors, pregnancy, impending loss of a job, housing or shelter bed, caretaking responsibilities, and potential separation of families. And they say that they came to all these new standards like, hey, we're not going to help you if you're white or you're cisgender, after undergoing an intensive anti-racist strategic planning process and carefully examining our practices, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, why am I opposed to a bail fund? Okay, there's a few reasons. First of all, bail funds are not as responsible for individuals. If you or I were to get arrested and we went before a judge And the judge determined there was probable cause for the charges that we were arrested for investigation of, and they're going to set bail based on factors like my likelihood to reoffend, my likelihood to come back to court. Then traditionally how it works, let's say it's $1,000 bail. I might have to provide collateral to show that I have something worth $1,000, where if I don't show back up in court, that thing is going to be taken away from me. Traditionally, I'd go, if I don't have the money, and I'd go to a bail bondsman, and then I might have to put 20% cash down in order to get out. You sacrifice that to the bail bondsman. And then you also might, if it's so high, have to have collateral. So now I have a personal investment, or my family member might do it. You might have a murder suspect who puts their mom's house as collateral, or their mom puts their house as collateral. You can't put somebody else's house that doesn't belong to you as collateral. And then you have that incentive to say, okay, if I don't come back to court, mom's house is going to be sold so that the bail bondsman can be paid, because the bail bondsman's now on the hook for my $1 million bond or whatever it was. So that is an incentive. And that's why we've talked a lot on the show in recent weeks about the importance of setting some sort of monetary bail and not letting criminals go on their own personal recognizance. Because then it's like, okay, what incentive do they have not to come back to court? Because what, there's going to be a warrant out for their arrest? I doubt they care. So when you have these these bond funds, and it's just other woke citizens contributing $5, $10, $20 and saying to the bond fund, you bail out people who you want to bail out. Well, that fund and those individuals, they don't really they've already given their money to the fund. And the person who's been bailed out, why would they say, oh, well, these good citizens came together to bail me out, so I better go back to court so these people I've never met and don't know get their money back? No, they don't care, right? And there have been some examples. For instance, the first murder of 2023 in Seattle, the first homicide of this year, was by a man who the Northwest Bail Fund bailed out. Not only that, and this is an article from Como News, nearly 52% of the defendants bailed out by the fund since mid-2020 failed to appear for their court dates, according to the King. You don't say. Well, you just tickle me. I would have never anticipated that would be the case. It says, also among those the bail fund assisted, more than 20% were later charged with a new felony, versus 15% of defendants who posted bail without the fund. Yeah, but that first homicide, again, of 2023, this is from Como News, the man in custody for Seattle's first homicide of 2023 had previously been bailed out of jail by a nonprofit with a track record of assisting violent repeat offenders. So again, first of all, I need to know who gives their money to this cause out of all the causes out there. Even if you want a cause that you think is going to help BIPOC communities, for instance, first of all, I feel like it's a little racist to say, well, we're going to help BIPOC communities by contributing to a bail fund that gets people out of prison, as if BIPOC people, that's like the only help they need is to get out of prison. That's so weird to me. Soft bigotry of low expectations. But again, this is like, at that point, monopoly money. Because again, there's no incentive for that alleged criminal to come back to court if their concern was losing the money that they had to put up to get out of jail. Because it's not their money. You think they really care? No. 52% of defendants bailed out by the fund since mid-2020 failed to appear for their court dates. This is not a surprise. This is not shocking stuff. And I spoke a couple months ago to a bail bondsman gathering. I just talked about some of the issues with public safety. And again, the important work they do. It's really important. They help people facilitate their constitutional rights. When they're innocent until proven guilty, to not rot away in a jail cell. That's very, very important. But I was also told, and it's something we continue to look into, that sometimes, so for instance, if you've got grandma bailed you out, right? And you didn't show up for court. There are certain instances where a judge might feel really generous and say, okay, we're not going to charge grandma all that money, give her money back or something like that. But there are instances where judges are doing that for the bail fund and saying, hey, this person didn't show up. Usually you'd have to forfeit all that amount, but we'll give it back to you, which they don't often do for defendants. So it's all just really, really interesting. But first of all, this is going to be bad for public safety. This is also going to be incredibly, I think, telling of who this fund, after this brief hiatus, decides to bail out. Because again, they have a track record of bailing out repeat violent offenders, at least one of which went on to kill someone. So they're back. I really want to know who's contributing to that cause. Let me know. Nicole, is that, have you been putting your hard-earned money into the Northwest Bail Fund?
Oh, no, that's not where I choose to invest my
Because you're a racist.
extra money.
No? Okay. Yeah, there's no, by the way, if anybody's curious, there's no return on investment for that. So
Right.
that wouldn't really be an investment.
Not so much.
Yeah, it's almost like donating money to make your community less safe.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
That's what it is.
Oh, good time.
Now, I'm sure that there have been a couple success stories out of it, and that's very, go get them. But
Sure. You know what?
it's not
You're
worth
right.
the-
I'm going to be more undivided. You're
Yeah.
right. If they've got someone who, gosh, I could lose a job if I can't bail out, innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
And they can come in, help that person out. They go back to court, I'm sure, because it says 48% of the time they've come back to court. So I'm sure you're right. I'm sure there are some good stories of people who were helped out and now they're on the right track.
Yeah.
I would love to hear some of those stories. See if you
Yeah.
can dig one of those up.
Okay, I'm on it.
Oh, she's on it. All right, we have an awesome Sundays with subscribers this week for all of you. It was a really interesting conversation about a topic that you just don't hear discussed in this much detail anywhere in corporate media, and that's why I love the show. But I'm kind of glad that we're airing it on Sundays with subscribers, because I'm worried if we put it up on YouTube, I'd be demonetized, or Facebook would take it down and I'd get some sort of strike or lose my page. I don't know. Anyway, let me give a little context first. So Billboard Chris is he was a Canadian dad. And he was really concerned. He's a dad to 2 girls, and he was really concerned about this increasing gender ideology being pushed on kids, and hormone therapy for youth, surgical interventions for youth who believe that they're transgender. So he started to go across the country. Well, first he tried to put an actual billboard up in Vancouver. And a politician got it taken down because they said it was hate speech. And you know what it said? It said, "I heart J.K. Rowling," the Harry Potter author, because people think she's a TERF, that she's anti-trans. Mm-hmm. That's the billboard that he put up that got taken down. So he decided, well, if I put the billboard on my body, no one can take it down because it's on my body. So he wears this billboard around. We got a picture, actually. He was in Seattle this past week. This is him at Pike Place Market. And again, he's got a billboard. This is the one he typically wears. Sometimes he changes up occasionally. Children cannot consent to puberty blockers. And it's got a little link to his website where you can read studies, et cetera, et cetera. So he went down to, and he usually goes to traditionally some of the most progressive, liberal places, a lot of liberal colleges. And so he came into Seattle and he went to, this has got to be a brave man. He went to the University of Washington campus, and then he went to Capitol Hill. And then he went down to Pike Place Market. And as always, he was met with varying levels of stability, where some people just really want to sometimes attack. He's been attacked and all this. For instance, he was up on, I'll play a couple videos that he posted to Twitter here. He was up on Capitol Hill. And one of the first people he encountered tried to break his tripod. He was part of that exchange.
Oh, he just came along and broke my tripod.
Why don't you just go somewhere else?
Well, he just came along and
it doesn't matter
broke
what
my
you're filming
property.
for. Go bother somebody else.
Because he broke my property.
It doesn't matter. Go bother somebody else. What's this going to do for you?
Well, you think people can
What is this
break
going to
out his
do? But what is
property?
this going to do for you? You're out here bothering people. I see your sign. Go somewhere else.
Yeah. And then he has some conversations that are very productive. He said he was up on the University of Washington campus. An individual came up to him. They ended up having, he said, like a 40-minute conversation about how important actual studies are, not only to have out there on gender transition surgeries for minors and hormone blockers, but how important it is for parents to actually go through that kind of data before they make these decisions with their kids.
The average parent should not have to read these things.
They absolutely should.
No.
If a parent is going to transition their child, they should be reading every
be-
single ounce of research
be
in
reading
existence.
all of the research for cancer treatments, for any treatment, for any surgery their child has.
So puberty is not a medical condition. Cancer is a medical condition.
Gender dysphoria is a medical condition.
Gender dysphoria is absolutely.
And we can assess that in children.
Yeah. So some conversations good, some conversations bad, but Billboard Chris was nice enough to come in to sit down with us at length. We talked for nearly an hour about his views on transgenderism, both for adults and in children. We had some disagreements on the issue, but overall he said that he believes that this is a conversation that is being more and more mainstreamed by the day, and he thinks it's going to lead to major changes in the United States of America as it has elsewhere in the world. So here is a little clip of the interview that's going to air this week on Sundays with Subscribers.
You know, whether you believe in God or evolution, this ideology makes no sense. Because if you believe in God, this ideology is teaching that God made us wrong.
Sure.
And if you believe in evolution, as I do, you can also believe in both. This ideology teaches that somehow 1 billion years of the process of natural selection has failed. And during this little blip in history, we need a pharmaceutical company to help our children be who they really are. In England, Finland, and Sweden, they all did away with this. A review of all the evidence, not by politicians, but by the professional pediatricians and the medical boards, found that there was no evidence that this was helping children's mental health. Yeah. So they've stopped doing this. They've also stopped it in Denmark, and they're stopping it in Norway.
Do you think eventually America will stop it too?
100%. The AAP has just started a systematic review. Now, I consider them to be a corrupt organization, so we'll see if they do this honestly or not. But every day, thousands more parents are learning what's going on, and it's just going to continue to grow. No one was talking about this 3 years ago when I started. It's not all because of me. It's a lot of people working on this. But because of all of our efforts now, this is the number one cultural issue of the day. It's on the news media every single day, especially conservative media. And we have 20 states that passed legislation to stop this. Of course, they're all Republican states. But that's always the way this was going to go. It'll be the red states. It'll spread to the purple states. And eventually, either these blue states stop this or we're going to vote them out. Because as the truth gets out there, this is an unstoppable movement of truth.
Interesting conversation. If you want to watch the full thing, become an Undivided subscriber, undividedpod.com. That is part of our weekly show, Sundays with Subscribers. Interesting guy who's dedicated his life to a very interesting, often thankless, sometimes violent career path. I mean, he said he's had his arm broken. And you'll probably recognize some of the videos of him being attacked because they've been on the national media, but he's built this huge social media following, and this is his issue. This is what he cares about more than anything else. Did you have something, Nicole?
Oh, I was just going to say he's very hard to argue with. Like I would
Canadian
challenge
accent.
people. Well, but he's very calm. He's very, he's got the accent, and then he's just, he's got a very supported argument, and it's very I wouldn't argue with anything, although I'm not looking to argue with him, but I would challenge people that disagree to tell me what they disagree with based on the facts and science that he supports it with.
Yeah, and I think so. He and I had a couple disagreements, just like philosophically, on how he looks at some of these things. But we talked through them, and he's very calm. He's got the Canadian accent, so you immediately is very disarming. But his whole thing is just having conversations. Yeah, we should be able to, because one of the questions I asked him is, "Are you instigating?" You're going to Capitol Hill with a sign that says children cannot consent to puberty blockers. Are you instigating? And some of the videos I've seen, it's like, okay, just let them walk away. You don't have to follow them with the video. But he makes a valid point that we should be able to have conversations. And if you don't want to have a conversation about it, you should be able to just walk away without assaulting him, without screaming at him wildly. And so this is true with anything, is that we should be able to have reasonable, rational conversations. And I've never watched a video clip of his where he's yelling at people, where he's being vitriolic at people. So it all boils down to, do you want to talk about it or not? If you don't, then go away.
Right. And if this is your mission, it doesn't make sense to go, stand outside a church. Like, you have to go to where you want to touch people with your message.
Right. So. Yeah, that is true, is that if you want to have uncomfortable conversations on the issue of transgenderism in youth and reassignment surgeries and stuff, well, then those uncomfortable conversations are going to happen in places where those ideas are more supported than not. So that is going to be somewhere like Seattle or a liberal college campus. So really interesting stuff. really cool conversation and cool guy. So that'll be coming up this week. All right, next in our segment, Unbelievable, we'll talk about just the latest failure to get protections for DACA recipients, which I have a real problem with. I'll explain why. But first, we've been talking about our friends at First Mark Insurance. I heard from several of you on Facebook yesterday that you are now members of the First Mark family, and you just absolutely love having all your insurance housed with them. The customer service is great. You could save money in the process. Mike and I took the First Mark Challenge in the spring. We are very happy we did. Not only do we have better service, we have much better coverage than we did otherwise. Dave Taylor is the CEO of First Mark, and he said that the idea of the First Mark Challenge is simple. Just give them a chance to prove themselves.
We believe and we say that we will help 100% of the people that we work with. Okay. Now that doesn't mean necessarily that 100% of the people we work with are going to become First Mark clients, but we believe that we will actually help 100% of the people, whether that be stay with your current carrier, but let's modify your coverage a bit so you're better protected, or ultimately, hopefully come over to First Mark. We're going to put you with a different company and give you better coverage, right? So the challenge is really challenging individuals to give us an opportunity to prove that to them. That's really what the First Mark Challenge is.
Yeah. And again, I've heard from people who they took the First Mark Challenge, dedicated a little bit of time to it, doesn't cost you anything. And then First Mark came back to him and said, your insurance is just fine. You have great insurance at a great value. You don't need us, essentially. And I think that is a really good measure of a trustworthy company who's going to do the right thing for you. So visit firstmarkinsurance.com, firstmarkinsurance.com. They work for you. All right. The issue of DACA recipients, these are young people who were brought to this country through no fault of their own, illegally, but who have been granted temporary protections to be here. Their plight might go back again to the U.S. Supreme Court. Let's talk about it in our segment, Unbelievable. To me, the issue of so-called dreamers is really something that I believe shows the fundamental failure of the two-party system in the United States of America. And I have a strong opinion on this. I think that these children who were brought here, yes, they were brought here illegally, but they were brought here sometimes as toddlers, as infants, through no fault of their own. The United States is the only place that they have ever known. And the idea of making them stay here in limbo, not knowing whether they are true Americans, whether they're going to be able to stay here, even if they've been here now and they're adults and they've been here their entire lives as children. The idea that maybe one day they could be sent back to a country they don't even know. It bothers me deeply. And one of the reasons that it bothers me deeply is both parties have feigned support for dreamers over the years. Both parties. And by the way, the American populace, polls have shown repeatedly that Americans, by and large, want dreamers to be full-blown Americans with all the protections and to be able to put the saga behind them. And what has been really bothersome over the years is Democrats and Republicans alike have said, yes, we want protections for dreamers, but they always want it in exchange for something else. They want to use these people who they say they care about, whose plight they say they care about. They want to use them as political pawns. Not just Republicans, Democrats have done it as well. And now, again, these court cases keep coming up, and this issue is likely to go back to the U.S. Supreme Court when it doesn't have to. Congress can deal with this. If Republicans and Democrats truly want to find a solution for the dreamers, they could do it. And they could avoid these routine, repeated legal battles, and they could avoid another legal battle in the U.S. Supreme Court. So the latest ruling, this is from the New York Times, federal judge again rules DACA is illegal. The judge maintained that President Barack Obama exceeded his authority when he created the program, which has allowed thousands of young, undocumented immigrants to avoid deportation and work legally. The New York Times goes on to say the decision is the latest twist in a 5-year-long court saga that has left the program and its beneficiaries, known as dreamers, hanging in the balance. While the ruling is a blow to the immigrants, the judge did not mandate an immediate end to the program. Current applicants will be able to keep and renew their protection. No new applications will be allowed. The government is almost certain to appeal the decision to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, experts said, and the case is likely to end up in the Supreme Court. And then the judge in this case who issued this ruling said exactly what I've said on this issue, is that regardless of whether Obama exceeded his authority in granting these protections, Congress can fix it. Congress can make it right. The judge saying in his opinion on Wednesday, the judge nominated by President George W. Bush said that the administration's effort amounted to, quote, instituting its own solution regardless of the dictates of Congress. He added, the executive branch cannot usurp the power bestowed on Congress by the Constitution, even to fill a void. And look, I agree. If there's a program or something the president has done, whatever president it is, that's unconstitutional, that is using powers that the Constitution does not grant to them, I agree that we can't just let that slide, right? So if what Obama did really was overstepping his authority and Congress should have been the one to dictate protections for dreamers, then yes. But at this stage, the best way to fix it is for Congress to make a decision, is for Congress to decide, do we actually care about these young people or not? Now, all of that being said, in my very strong opinion that dreamers should be granted full-blown citizenship and this issue should be put to bed, that doesn't mean that I think that should be the case in perpetuity. One of the common arguments against doing that for these dreamers is that, well, you're just encouraging individuals to continue to bring their young children, their infants across the border, hoping that the U.S. will continue to do what it did for this group of dreamers. I'm not advocating for that. What I'm advocating for is to fix what's already been done. The individuals who've already been approved under the program, who already have the protections to be here, to work here legally, make them Americans. Congress can do that. But I'm not saying you do that for every other person who wants to bring a child illegally across the southern border, because then you do encourage that sort of behavior and it erodes the security at the southern border even further. So these are two separate issues. What to do with individuals who come in moving forward, who weren't part of the program, and what to do, again, with people who came here as kids, who this is the only country they've ever known, many of whom have gone to school here, have gone to college here, have worked here legally under this program, have paid taxes legally for years, might be adults now, and they know no other country than the United States of America. And I was, just reminiscing, because this is a topic I've been doing commentaries on for a long time, including back when I was at Fox 13, and it bothers me, Democrats bother me more with this. Because there have been instances where Democrats, they want to act like they have the moral high ground on this issue, but there have been times where they had the power, the control, the votes to be able to get protections for dreamers. But they didn't want to do it they didn't want to have to give Trump things that Trump wanted in exchange for protections for dreamers. They didn't want to have to give in to his demands for more security measures at the southern border. And then Republicans is the same. They're like, oh, we care about the dreamers. However, we don't want these things attached to it, essentially. If we didn't have such an absolutely broken two-party system in this country, where the parties are looking out only for their own best interests, where they are absolutely incapable of coming together to work on anything meaningful, if we didn't have the two-party system, this would not be an issue anymore. Truly, this would not be an issue anymore. But all that fake, feigned, unbelievable care and concern for the dreamers, they put that aside for the sake of their own political parties. Because political party comes first. When you're in politics, that comes before anything. And yes, even for Democrats, that comes before the suffering and the uncertainty of these dreamers that they've had for years and years and years. And they can say up and down that they care about them, but their actions have shown that they don't. And Republicans are to blame as well. If you wanted to fix the issue, you could. At this point, it is truly unbelievable. And honestly, it is quite shameful. All right, coming up next, Hunter Biden indicted on gun charges? Wow, this is quite the day. And are the scales of justice balancing back out? I don't know. We'll talk about it coming up next. But first, we've been talking about Wes Jones, a wonderful real estate agent in our area, all around nice guy. He and his team can do things for you that regular real estate agents can't. They have an innovative marketing strategy to make sure that they get the most possible eyeballs on your listing. And they also have something really cool called the Listing Boost Concierge Service. They can come in if you need updates to your home. They can handle it all with the contractors, and they can even pay for it for you up front. It's what they did for Susan in Federal Way.
I knew I had to paint. I knew I needed to get new flooring. I needed to get new lighting. I told him up front that I was very interested, that I did not have the time or the finances to do what needed to be done. And he immediately jumped in with, well, I do. Work started immediately. And I would say in 2 to 3 weeks, they had landscaping done. They had all the painting done. The new floors were put in. All the lighting was put in. It just was all so fast. And the rest is history. It was on the market for 7 days. I was able to get well over listing price.
To be specific, Susan got 20 offers, sold it for 15% over list price, and ended up getting $200,000 more than an investor offered her before the renovations. Love it. That was a $200,000 phone call to West Jones and Associates. Had she not made it, I mean, for most people, their house is their greatest asset. And if you're selling a house you've lived in for 25 years like Susan, the idea that you could get $200,000 more for it just by making some updates that Wes and his team are going to help you with, I think it's really awesome. So if you're in the market to sell your home, check out some other real estate agents, fine, but make sure you also check out Wes Jones and his team at sellwithwes.com. Sellwithwes.com, you can start by using their home value calculator to see how much your home is worth. It might be worth more than you think. Sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. All right, dipping outside Washington State for a moment. Before we get to Florida Report with my sister, who's going to be here next week, I'm very excited. We saw the news of Hunter Biden being indicted on gun charges. This is, regardless of whether he's even found guilty, I think this is good. I think the country needed this. Is that wrong to say? Because all this attention on Trump and indictment, and what you see a lot on Fox is, well, what about Hunter? And I agree. I mean, all the videos and photos of Hunter engaged in illegal activity, like on video, in pictures, and nothing happens to the guy. And then you wonder why people wonder whether there's two standards of justice in this country, depending on what your political party is or who your parents are. So anyway, there were some really obvious things that Hunter Biden had done. And remember, he was about to get like a sweetheart plea deal, and then it kind of fell apart. And now we're seeing that he has been indicted on gun charges. This is according to NBC News. Hunter Biden indicted on federal gun charges. The indictment against the president's son comes after a plea agreement on tax and gun charges fell apart in July and amid a probe of his finances by House Republicans. So there are two counts here that are tied to Hunter allegedly filling out a form when he purchased a revolver in October 2018, saying he was not using illegal drugs. And of course, video and photos that he took himself prove that that was not the case. And then a third count alleges that he was in possession of a firearm while using an illegal drug, which again, Hunter kind of is giving the prosecution their best evidence they've ever had, because he apparently chose to document so much of his illicit activity. And then it says that Biden certified on a federal mandated form that he was, quote, not an unlawful user of and addicted to any stimulant, narcotic drug, or any other controlled substance, when in fact he knew that statement was false and fictitious. So again, I mean, it seems like innocent until proven guilty, I always feel the need to say, but this has been pretty well documented by Hunter Biden himself. And I tend to think that the sweetheart plea deal he was going to get falling apart, the gun charges coming down heavy, I just think it's going to be maybe helpful for the country. Because every time I turn on MSNBC or CNN, it's like, Trump charges, Trump charges, Trump charges. And then every time I turn on Fox, it's like, well, what about Hunter? What's going on with Hunter? And it's like, you know what? They're all freaking criminals. I mean, alleged criminals. But to me, it's like, wow, we have the former president of the United States who's wrapped up in all these indictments, the president's son who's now indicted on gun charges, president of a different political party, and then you have House Republicans, rightfully so, looking into what the current president knew about his son's overseas business dealings, of which there is ample evidence that members of Biden's family have been getting payouts. Anyway, it just shows that, like, we need a clean slate. All these old money, old politics families, you really think that they're working for us? You really think that they care about us? No, again, it just goes to the absolute failure of the two-party system, the power that we give them over our lives, and how much leniency personally people will give them if they align with them politically, if they are lined up with their ideology. It's weird stuff. These people don't care about us. They care about themselves. They care about money. They care about power, and it's just more obvious than ever. All right, it is Thursday. That means it's time to check in on what's happening in the Sunshine State. It is our segment, Florida Report.
It's not even controversial anymore.
People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
Miranda, hey. I'm going to see you in a week in the flesh. I'm very excited about that.
Me too.
That's it? Nothing else?
I'm actually extremely excited. I just didn't want to be so extra.
Oh, okay. That's all right. Very excited. We're all on wedding fever mode. All right. Some Ron DeSantis stories. There is, of course, renewed news about, new COVID booster, maybe more effective with the variants. Well, Ron DeSantis and Florida's top health officials say not so fast.
Yeah, they do. I mean, DeSantis was a pretty big supporter of the vaccines during the thick of the pandemic, but he kind of retracted on that once he kind of started to realize how they weren't really doing what they were promised to do. So he basically said, I refuse to let the CDC use Florida residents as guinea pigs for another untested, unverified booster. So him and top health officials are basically telling Floridians to not get it if they're under the age of 65.
Yeah, I mean, and they're definitely warning against it. I don't know. I feel two ways about this. I don't want the government telling me to get it. I don't want the government telling me not to get it. I just want the government to say, hey, here's the best information we have. I want to be able to trust that information isn't, politically skewed. And then I want to make a decision for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no harm can ever come out of caution and educating yourself on something, no matter what it is. So I do think that him kind of coming with that foot forward first might make a lot of people second guess the idea of getting it and maybe do their own research. But you're right. You don't want the government to be like, don't do this either, or do this. It feels very leading either way. So
yeah, everything around it feels kind of political. But I mean, they're right in the sense that we were sold a bill of goods on the first COVID vaccine that did not turn out to be true. And I got it. I regret getting it because I just don't think in hindsight that I needed it. And I don't think that we knew enough about it to sort of rush to it. So I think it's good to urge caution and let people make those decisions for themselves. But certainly if you're vulnerable, that might be something that you want to look into further and consider. All right. There's some dueling stories about neo-Nazis in Florida that to me just speaks to the absolute ridiculousness of the media right now. But so the first one, Florida has it's a fairly new public nuisance law that has to do with kind of, how do I put this, signage on property that's not yours being considered a public nuisance. And it's getting attention because there was a neo-Nazi arrested over signage that he put up.
Yeah, correct. So just outside of Orlando, a neo-Nazi who is an outright forward member of a bunch of different neo-Nazi groups put up some swastikas and other hateful messages on an overpass over the highway outside of Orlando. And I'm sure everybody's seen something or another on an overpass over the highway. And that's kind of specifically what this law was put in place to do, is kind of really goes at hate speech towards religious groups, because that's something we see more in Florida than anything, is a lot of the Nazi stuff and the anti-Semitic kind of comments. So it is nice to see that law actually, worked out. And this guy he got arrested. There's 2 more other people that were responsible for the same hate messages that they're looking for. But it does go to show that Florida does have things in place to stop hate speech and stop situations from this from happening in public places.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of things on overpasses. Can't say I've ever seen someone put up a flyer with a swastika on it. But my understanding of this, because people always get into, okay, where is the First Amendment rights start and stop? My understanding is it basically protects against someone putting up signage of any kind on property that's not theirs without consent, which makes a lot of sense. Don't put something up on property that's not yours.
It does. And it's as much as public property, some people might feel entitled to that, you still need to get permission if you want to air your opinion on public property. So I think it just kind of gives them an end game for this. Obviously it should go without saying, but people still do it. They're still going to stick signs on lawns and do things like that. But at least there puts some sort of consequence in place for people who do not have that common sense to not touch things that aren't theirs. So
yeah, I liken that to kind of graffiti. I mean, sure, you can take a sign down, but, graffiti artists in Seattle are like, well, you can remove it. It's just ridiculous stuff. But I also think with just anything on an overpass, it's so distracting. When I'm on an interstate driving under and I've got somebody waving signs, whether it's political signs, or I don't care if it's a sign that's love each other. You're looking up and you're not looking at the road. So that is a public nuisance, in my opinion. Now, meanwhile, while the state of Florida is arresting neo-Nazis for putting hate speech up on public overpasses, Rolling Stone really thinks that Florida is just a bastion, a neo-Nazi loving state.
Yeah, they put this article out today that says neo-Nazis gloat as Florida becomes a magnet for hate. And it is just appalling to me as a Floridian, first of all, because I happen to think that this state is not what people think it is. But this is kind of in response to a neo-Nazi get-together that they had outside of Orlando at the beginning of the year, the beginning of the month. Only 50 people, and I know there should be 0, but 50 people showed up to this meet and greet of neo-Nazis. And the guy that got arrested was actually at this same convention of people who got together. But that is their First Amendment right, as despicable and obnoxious as it is. They do have a right to gather and to, protest, or I don't know. It's not even a protest at that point. I don't know what it is, just shouting in the street. Yeah. But they can do that, but they can't put their messages all over other people's property.
Yeah, it's all weird because the idea that, first of all, it's just Rolling Stone trying to dunk on DeSantis. I mean, it's very predictable. Yeah. But Florida is far from the only state that has neo-Nazis and neo-Nazi groups there. In fact, Washington State has had issues with that in the past, and we're a very deep blue progressive state. So yeah. I don't think that, what is a state supposed to do? Be like, let's check everyone's, internet activity and everything before they move into our state to make sure. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And so it's just, again, it's so transparent, trying to dunk on DeSantis. I haven't seen any statistics about neo-Nazis per capita of every state in the union. And if you can show me that Florida has more self-professed neo-Nazis per capita than every state in the union, then we can have a conversation about it.
Yeah, well, maybe they feel more safe to gather here because of the rhetoric that's been put out about our state. But at the end of the day, I'm here to combat that all day long and remind you that we do have laws that help prevent people from spewing their obnoxious opinions in public places.
Yeah, so. And you do have a lot of wonderful people in Florida who are not neo-Nazis, who love other human beings, regardless of the color of their skin. And this is all just giving the rest of you a bad name. All right, Miranda. Well, we shall see you here next week for my wedding. Maybe, who knows, a little in-person Florida report. We shall see. Thank you. See you soon.
See you soon. Bye.
It's not even controversial anymore.
People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
I just wonder if some of these newsrooms, these national ones, sit around, they're like, hey, what bad thing can we cook up about Florida today? It's like, well, meanwhile, more people move to that state than any other state in the nation. Oh, yeah, they've got a bunch of neo-Nazis. Love it there. Yeah, print that. It's just so weird. All right, before we get to questions and comments from the stream, we've got some good ones. I've been talking about the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic since January, and one of the best parts about it, not only is having lost so much weight on the program myself, but hearing some of the stories from those of you who've found tremendous success in the program. Ben and Leslie is a couple I've ran into not once, but twice out and about. We took a picture together, down 101 pounds. I got to check in with them because I'm sure that figure is more than 101 pounds now. We lost like a whole pre-teenager on the program, which is great. So keep sending those stories in because I really love to hear other people's success stories. To me, if you can follow a structured program, then you can succeed on this program. There's no prepackaged meals. There's no counting calories, no like hypnosis or strenuous workout routines. It's really about teaching you the right foods in the right portions and then how to maintain that weight loss for life so that you don't feel like you're on a lifelong diet. And all of that just worked really well for me. So do what I did and what so many others have done. Schedule a free 15-minute consultation with Dr. Ryan Coogan and his team at eastsideweightlossclinic.com. That's eastsideweightlossclinic.com. Okay, questions, comments from the live stream today. Pegasus Chronicle 199 super chat on the bail issue. Brandi has officially been black-pilled on bail. On Billboard Chris, Todd Welch says, I do find it interesting that when it comes to transitioning kids that I hear about feelings for the supporters and not interest in science and research. Yeah, I mean, to me, when you're talking about any sort of surgical intervention, I don't understand the desire to talk about well, how would it make you feel versus, is it scientifically necessary for you to do? So I think you make a really good point on that. Let's see, Chris Jones, if we're talking about, this is on the Florida Report conversation about Florida saying that you can't, it's like a nuisance law to hang certain things on property that's not yours. Chris says, wouldn't banners on public property, i.e. highway overpasses, be covered by the First Amendment? I don't think so. I guess it would depend how you affix them to it, because, for instance, you can't graffiti on public property because that's illegal. So in what way, like, is it considered? I guess it's the line between defacing it versus just standing there with a sign. Did you have a thought, Nicole?
No, I'm just trying to think as far as the J.K. Rowling part. I don't know about Canada's laws versus ours.
I don't think this is
Canada.
about Canada.
But yeah.
I don't think this is about Canada. I think he's asking about what we talked about on Florida Report.
Sure.
Yeah. Brandon Robillard with $2 super chat. The liberal rodeo is all clowns and no cowboys. Ha! I see what you did there. Let me see here. On DACA and the fact that that's still being litigated through the system, Brett says anyone should be welcomed in America as long as it's done legally and they have means to support themselves and not be a leech to society. Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously fully for legal immigration. That's what makes our country wonderful. What we're talking about with DACA recipients are people who were brought here as children illegally. And that's the crux of that issue. Joanne says, why worry about DACA kids now? I agree. If they have spent their lives here, they should be able to stay here. All these illegal immigrants coming across our border is another whole issue. They are not doing anything to stop illegal entry, but are worried about young adults who have lived their whole life here. Totally ridiculous. I agree. Two totally separate issues. And that's why I'm saying put a bow on the DACA issue. Make them Americans so they're not sitting there in limbo like, am I going to be sent back to a different country one day that I don't even remember? And a totally different issue than what's happening with immigration now. Two Ladies Midwest Adventures agreed, Brandi, the common sense approach is the best remedy, especially for the dreamers. Who would we push to fix this? I mean, I think that any member of Congress should be willing to, regardless of political party, I think, emailing your member of Congress and telling them that you need to come together on this issue without strings attached. That's the issue always with DACA. They always want to attach something they want, to it. And that's why I say that they're using these young people as political pawns, and it's wrong. Let's see. On the Hunter gun charges, Matt Gilbert says, going to sound weird, but I'm against Hunter being charged because being an addict should not disqualify you to your Second Amendment rights. Well, technically, he's not charged because he's an addict. He's charged because he lied on a federal form about being an addict. So technically, he's being charged for lying. And you should, if you're lying on a form where you're filling out whether you're qualified to own a firearm, regardless of what lie you tell on the form, that's the issue. And I did put that was an interesting point you raised, though. And I put a poll in our live chat: should illegal drug use disqualify you from firearm ownership? 55% said yes, 45% said no. All right. Pegasus with another $1.99 super chat. Hate speech is not real. Your sister is wrong. I think that there is speech that rises to the level of hate speech. I think reasonable people can have disagreements and debate about, okay, but how far does the First Amendment go, for instance? But I do think that there is speech that's only intent is to instill hate or to hate other human beings. Any more in there today? Let me see. Sorry, I'm on the death scroll right now. I've scrolled so far down the screen. By the way, and we're going to get into it in this next segment, I'm open to wedding advice. I feel like every day on the show next week, we need to read one comment that has a piece of wedding advice from our viewers and listeners.
Okay, wedding day advice.
No, happy marriage, life advice, or wedding day advice.
Okay,
so we'll pick one comment every day on wedding advice for Mike and I. But come on, let's get some thoughtful stuff in here. So
marriage advice.
Yeah, sorry. Marriage advice.
Got it.
You're right. Yeah, marriage advice. And the reason I bring that up is because I'm going to talk about it in our first weekly segment with Zach Abraham of Bulwark Capital. So we added them as a sponsor to the show this week. But I was talking to them. I was like, I actually think, because financial literacy is a big issue for me, where I think it could help our younger generation not suck at life so much right now, but also it can help all of us. And so I was like, why don't you come on once a week? We'll talk about an issue related to improving people's financial situations, especially in this crummy economy that's just built up like a little house of cards. So we're going to do it every Thursday. And I had to be a little bit selfish with Zach this week and talk to him about my upcoming wedding. Zach Abraham with Bulwark Capital. Welcome for our very first weekly segment. I'm expecting to be a financial whiz like in a year's time. Is that too much to ask?
No, I don't think. Well, I mean, you'd have to get a different person on here.
Oh,
But-
don't undercut yourself. We're trying to amp you up. So I'm going to be really selfish in the first segment with you because I'm getting married next Saturday. I mean, if he says yes, which I assume he will. And I'm very curious. Mike and I have already been talking about how to meld our financial lives together. Is there sort of do's or don'ts or a first step that we should be looking at once we're married?
I just think it's really imperative going into a relationship. Obviously, we know the number one cause of divorce are arguments and debate, over money and finances and things of that nature. And so, first of all, I think it's important that you both go into it having really open, free-flowing conversations about the way that you both see things. And there's many different ways to do it. Me and my wife, for instance, it's, everything is melded together seamlessly. It's just hers and mine, and there is no separation. I've seen other clients, though, that do keep things separate and manage to have a good marriage. So I think, I mean, for me, in my perspective, I think the number one thing going in is just making sure we're on the same page. Do we both contribute to 401ks? Do we know what's on, do we know what is in our loved ones, or our future spouses? Do we know what their financial life looks like? Are we aware of what their credit rating is, right? Or their credit score? So I think disclosure and openness is the key to it first and foremost. And then personally, I would advocate, working together. I think it's easier to plan when things are not separate, but like I said, I've seen people keep things separate and be able to successfully pull it off. Just the biggest thing is to structure a life where both of you understand what's going on in the other person's financial life, right? I just think that's so important. And people are like, well, I don't want to mix assets. And I'm like, well, you just got married, right? You did, unless you signed a prenup. To a certain degree, you just did.
I'll end with this one because Mike and he hates when I say this, but he's a little older than me, like a decade, right? So should we be planning for his retirement or for my retirement first and foremost? Because he's going to retire before me, probably by a lot.
Right. So the answer is both, right? So meaning part of his retirement, and part of you guys being able to financially sustain yourself through the beginning leg of his retirement is the fact that you're still working, right? So we need a combined approach. And so that comes down to there's kind of two sides of it for us, right? There's the income planning, making sure that we're getting enough income we need in a sustainable way out of the portfolio. And then there's looking at the long-term growth aspect because, when we were talking about this a few years ago, I don't think most people were taking it seriously, but inflation is going to play an increasingly important role going forward. What's it going to look like? I don't think we're looking at 15 to 20% post-apocalyptic, water world style inflation. But I do think that, seeing bouts of 5 to 10% inflation going forward, I think that's going to be a much more normal thing. And honestly, funny enough, Brandi, those types of scenarios, planning for retirement, are actually some of the easiest.
Oh,
yeah, it is, because when you have one spouse still working, right, it takes incredible pressure off of the financial plan, right? And so it actually makes it. I'm not saying hey, everybody should go get married with a 10-year age gap, but it does offer a lot of advantages and makes financial planning quite a bit easier.
I love it. Look at you, Zach Abraham, keeping marriages together, giving me personal wedding advice. I love it. Okay, well, Zach Abraham with Bulwark Capital, we will see you back on the show this time next week.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Listen, people, if we're going to do these segments every Thursday, I need you to take notes because we're all going to be wealthy, well prepared for retirement, happy in our marriages financially. Because I'm soaking up advice from Zach. So if there's a topic that you want to know about on the financial front, whether it's something related to the economy, inflation, how that's impacting your preparation for retirement, let us know and we can ask about it on one of our Thursday shows. I'll also note that Zach Abraham and Bulwark Capital, they're going to have a 2023 risk management strategy live webinar coming up next Thursday, September 28th at 3 p.m. So if you're kind of gearing up or you want to start that preparation for retirement or you're really close to it, you can learn how to protect your portfolio against risk, especially in the crazy world that we're living in today. If you want to sign up, go to knowyourriskradio.com, knowyourriskradio.com. Okay, Oliver Anthony has become sort of this a beacon for the working class in this country after his popular song, Rich Men North of Richmond. And now he is showing that not only is he a wonderful vocalist and musician, but he also has moral consistency. Let's get to it in our closing sanity check. I love this story. And honestly, this is something I thought about when Oliver Anthony had his hit song. And out of nowhere, I mean, this guy is plucked from musical obscurity and he's an overnight sensation. And I'm like, man, he's going to be making a lot of money in a very short period of time. And I wonder if that changes him. I mean, his whole song was about these rich politicians who don't care about people who are working themselves to death. And I thought, yeah, I wonder how quickly the money will change him. Well, at least for now, his moral consistency is still intact because there have been, he's been booking some gigs, obviously, and he found out, this is the article from Fox News, Oliver Anthony cancels show after venue hikes up ticket prices. He called it horse you know what. And I'm thinking, wow, how much? And he didn't know, he was blindsided by how much this venue who'd booked him was charging for tickets. And I looked, and it honestly, as far as concerts go, and for someone of that notoriety, the tickets weren't even that much. It was $90 a ticket, and then $200 if you wanted to do a meet and greet with him. So I was like, good for this guy. He basically tells him, kick rocks, cancels the show, goes on. I remember I'll play a video in a second, but he had gone on his Instagram and wrote a thing telling people, don't pay that. That's ridiculous. You should not have to pay that much to go to a concert. If anything, you should pay $25, maybe $50 to go to one of my shows. Here's a video he posted about his decision.
I had to pull off on the side of the road and make this video. My adrenaline's pumping, man. I'm pissed off right now. And don't buy Cotton Eye Joe tickets for $99 a piece. And sure as hell don't buy VIP passes for whatever bullshit price they're on. I have a buddy of mine who's not a booking agent. He's a friend of mine. He's a full-time plumber, and I'm trying to hire him full-time as my booking agent. And he agreed to the show, I guess, without asking for what the ticket prices are. Don't pay $100 for a ticket. That's horseshit. If we've got to cancel the venue and play somewhere else, we will. I didn't agree to it, and I don't want you to pay it. So please don't. I'm just trying to get the word out now. I don't know when the event got posted, but just hold off for a little bit.
Love that. Love this guy. And you looked into a little bit of what the venue said in response.
So the venue was talking about how much it costs to bring him to their... It's just a bar. So that's actually,
right.
I agree with you that that's a really good price these days
yes.
for a very intimate show in a bar, pretty much, right? But he said it costs, I think he said $125,000 to bring him in, and this would break them about even. And so that's why he's like, I had to charge that. But of course, they would make money on drinks and food and all that type of thing.
But maybe he doesn't have to charge as much. If he doesn't want tickets to be as much, then he would have to charge less to be able to get in. So I think he really needs to decide, because I like his consistency on, look, I'm like, I want to stick up for the working man and woman, and I want to make sure you can afford to go to one of my shows. $90, $200, that's ridiculous. But he is going to have to decide pretty quick what he wants this come to fame to look like for him. Because when you get involved in those promoters and those venues that take such a big chunk, and they handle all these other things associated with you being, famous and in demand, those costs, I mean, look at the cost of some of the concerts these days. So he's going to kind of have to decide what is his level of commitment going to be to the issues and the people who he cares about and who he represents, because he's going to have to say no a lot. And he's going to have to be firm and say, what do we need to do to get the price to where I want it to be for people to come and watch my shows? But I appreciate him trying to tell people, like, hey, let's keep it low, and I'm going to stand up for that and stand up for you. But he's going to have to make some concessions about what he wants his career to be.
Right. And I mean, that sounds like a big number, the $125,000, but I think that went to insurance costs, because you carry that liability. And then also, I mean, that was hotel, travel, everything for his band, him, everything. So I think it will put a spotlight on how much all of this costs and how much they're making, because it used to be that artists, that's how they made their money, was tours, because you never made money off CDs and you never made money off cassette tapes. Like those things just didn't have a high, you weren't making that much money. And now with with digital and things like that, people are really not making as much money. So they're having to make money on tour because that's the only way they can.
Yeah, but I think that it's been insane. The tickets prices have become insane.
Oh,
and I think it
out of
will
control.
take some high profile popular artists to get it back down to earth.
Yep.
I think with all of these, the what do you call them, the promoters and stuff, and the amount of money they take from artists. And so, yeah, if you have to have a couple people say, we're not doing this to people, we're not charging someone who loves an artist hundreds of dollars to go and see them, maybe he's going to start something.
I also think that a big problem is the scalper laws here. We don't have very good scalper laws. Whereas I went to Australia, they have strict scalper laws. So I was able to get Morgan Wallen tickets in Australia very easily. Here, I'm not able to get, I wasn't able to even get into the waiting room or whatever it was for Morgan Wallen because the scalpers are so out of control here.
Yeah.
And that's why they raise the ticket prices, right? Because scalpers buy them and then sell them for more. So the venue wants that piece of it or whatever. And so I think that's something else we need to look at in this country because their scalpers are pretty out of control.
Yeah, and seeing how much it costs just to enjoy some good music and good songs. All right, Nicole, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving Common Sense a comeback. Reminder of our merch store. We got our first shipment of orders out.
Yeah.
If you ordered hats or mugs, it's going to take a couple more days.
Yep.
But hang in there. That's all coming. But you can visit undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com. If you're a subscriber, there is a promo code for you that you can find on Patreon or Locals to get $5 off. All right, that is our final live show of the week. We'll see subscribers on Sundays with subscribers this week. We'll have an awesome conversation with Billboard Chris about his mission to raise awareness for what's happening with our youth in this country when it comes to the issue of transgenderism, etc. So it's a good interview. You're not going to want to miss it. For the rest of you, we will see you back on the live show on Monday at noon.